All right, let's just jump right into this explainer. Today, we're tracking the epic 45-year financial roller coaster of the world's most valuable company. We're going to walk through decades of dizzying highs, absolutely brutal crashes, and a resurrection that literally no one saw coming. We are talking, of course, about Apple, and its absolutely fascinating, wildly unpredictable journey on the stock market.
Now, just to set the stage here, ask yourself, how in the world does a company, one that was famously just 90 days away from total bankruptcy back in 1997, manage to reach a valuation higher than the combined GDP of entire countries? I mean, it sounds like pure science fiction, but it's the actual real-world history of Apple stock. This wasn't some smooth straight-line climb to the top. It was total chaos, going from being worth less than a single dollar per share, adjusted for splits, all the way up to a $3 trillion empire.
And let's put some real-world numbers to those stakes. If you had the incredible foresight, or, just sheer dumb luck, to invest $1,000 on Apple's very first day on the market, and you held on through all the stock splits and price hikes over the decades, that single $1,000 investment would be worth over $2 million today. Take a second to just let that sink in. $2 million. But to get there, you would have had to endure a truly staggering amount of market turbulence.
So let's go back to the beginning, December 12, 1980. Personal computers were still super rare in homes, but this scrappy young Silicon Valley company makes its massive public debut on the NASDAQ. Shares opened at $22 each. This was actually the biggest initial public offering since Ford went public way back in 1956. Apple raised $100 million on day one, launching with a $1.8 billion market cap. And incredibly, a 25-year-old Steve Jobs became a millionaire literally overnight.
The media totally knew this was a historic moment, too. The Wall Street Journal hit the nail on the head regarding the sheer hype around this young tech company, writing, "Since Eve, no Apple has tempted as much." I mean, it's a bit of irony that sounds remarkably like a prophecy today, right? The excitement was completely real, and investors were just captivated by what this company could eventually become.
But man, the 80s were a wild ride. During the first half of the decade, Apple had massive product success. They totally changed how the world viewed personal computers with the Macintosh in 1984. But then, just a year later in '85, Steve Jobs was famously ousted by his very own board of directors. Talk about whiplash. Without Jobs, the company seemingly kept growing, but it was really losing its soul and direction. Yet the stocks somehow kept climbing until they hit a major corporate milestone in 1987, which, by the way, was the exact same year they managed to survive the devastating Black Monday global market crash.
So that big milestone in '87, Apple initiated its first ever stock split, a 2-for-1 division. Now, if you're not super familiar, splitting shares basically just keeps the entry price affordable for everyday retail investors, completely without changing the company's total overall value. It's like slicing a pizza into more pieces. You still have the same amount of pizza. It was a brilliant tactical move for market psychology, keeping the public engaged even as the underlying value pushed higher. But, as we know, stock tricks can't save a company with bad products, and the '90s were just absolutely cruel to Apple. Without Jobs' vision, they released all these expensive, unwanted gadgets and just bled money quarter after quarter. By 1997, they were in a really dark place, literally 90 days away from going completely bankrupt. Adjusted for later splits, the stock was trading for under $1. Their market cap had plummeted to just $2.3 billion. That is 17 solid years of zero overall growth. They were basically right back where they started on IPO day. So how do you survive that kind of abyss? Well, Apple called back its prodigal son. Steve Jobs returns as the interim CEO, or the ICO as he liked to call it. And to save the company from immediate total collapse, he does something that caused absolute disbelief on Wall Street. He secures a $150 million lifeline from their biggest, most bitter rival, Microsoft. Bill Gates and Steve Jobs literally sealed a pact to keep Apple alive. The market was so completely shocked that Apple stock spiked 33% the very day they announced it. The greatest corporate comeback in history was officially on.
With Jobs firmly back at the wheel, the late '90s and early 2000s were just an era of frantic, brilliant reinvention. They brought back amazing design with those colorful iMacs in '98, which sent sales through the roof. They executed their second 2-for-1 split right during the dot-com boom in 2000. And then, when that bubble burst, Jobs was already pivoting. They dropped the iPod in 2001, the iTunes Store in 2003. They basically saw the digital music revolution coming before anyone else did, which led to a third 2-for-1 split in 2005 as the stock soared all over again.
But hidden inside all that incredible innovation was some real market terror.
When the dot-com bubble burst in the early 2000s, tech stocks were just decimated across the board. In 2003, despite actually having the iPod out in the wild, the broader market crash dragged Apple's split-adjusted share price down to a terrifying 25 cents. Just really think about that for a second. They're innovating, they're laying the groundwork for the entire future of tech, and their shares are literally trading for the cost of a gumball from a machine.
But everything, and I mean everything, changed on January 9, 2007. Steve Jobs steps onto that Macworld stage and delivers one of the most historic lines in tech history. Today, Apple reinvents the phone. The market immediately got it. The iPhone wasn't just a cool new gadget, it was an entirely new digital ecosystem. It totally transformed Apple from a niche computer company into a global mobile powerhouse, and the stock just skyrocketed consistently until Jobs sadly passed away in 2011, leaving the whole operation in the hands of Tim Cook.
Now, back then, plenty of critics swore Apple would just die off without Steve Jobs. Wow, were they wrong. Under Tim Cook's super steady leadership, the stock surged so aggressively they actually had to execute 2 more massive splits just to keep the shares tradable for regular people. In June 2014, they pulled off an unprecedented 7-for-1 split, dropping the price to around $92. That was a masterstroke, by the way, because it finally let Apple enter the Dow Jones in 2015. Then, right in the thick of the pandemic boom in 2020, they did a 4-for-1 split as everybody working from home just drove their valuations straight through the roof.
During Cook's era, Apple's financial trajectory literally started looking like a video game where someone turned on all the cheat codes. In August 2018, they shattered the ceiling to become the first publicly traded company in history to hit a $1 trillion market cap. Just 2 years later, in August 2020, while the whole world was locked down, they hit $2 trillion. And by January 2022, they briefly touched the $3 trillion mark. They systematically added trillions in value in under 4 years. Honestly, it's a scale of wealth creation that is almost hard for the human brain to fully process. And all of that incredible momentum culminated recently in late 2024. On December 26, Apple reached a new historic closing record of over $300 per share. Remember that $22 IPO price back in 1980 we talked about? Well, thanks to the massive compounding power of those 5 historical stock splits, just one single original share from 1980 has morphed into 224 shares today. And combined, they're worth over $40,000. So, to wrap up this explainer, let's just look at the raw math of this journey, because it is staggering. An initial $1,000 investment turning into $2 million, an absolutely absurd 130,000% growth rate since they were knocking on bankruptcy's door in '97. 5 massive, highly strategic stock splits, and a 19% compound annual growth rate sustained over 45 long years. These numbers prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that extreme corporate growth is never, ever a straight line. It is the ultimate test of endurance and resilience. Which brings us to our final thought for today. It's so easy for us to look at that $3 trillion peak today and just be in awe of it. But when you look at the absolute chaos between that $22 IPO, the near bankruptcy of the 90s, and the terrifying crash down to 25 cents, you really have to ask yourself a hard question. Would you have actually had the stomach to hold on to that stock through those dark years to see that historic success? It's definitely a fascinating thing to ponder. Thanks for diving into this incredible financial story with me, and always keep questioning the history behind the numbers.